Hey guys, Jason here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Positive Grid's Bias Amp 2 plugin with the Bias FX plugin in 4 easy steps. So let's pull up the studio and we'll dive right in. Alright guys, so the first step is a very basic step. What we want to do is we want to set up the Bias Amp 2 plugin and prepare the track so that we can create the tone that we want. So what I'm going to do is pull up the studio. Now I'm using PreSonus Studio One Pro, and I would assume that most recording software systems are relatively the same. So if you're not using Studio One, whatever you're using, it should be relative here. So we're pulling up Studio One, and for the sake of this video, I'm just going to create a brand new song here because we're just going to start from scratch on this. So once I have the song pulled up, we've got an empty canvas here. I'm going to go here and add a track. And this is the track that we're going to use for our guitar sound, and this is the one that we're going to be working with throughout this entire video. So last part of this step is we want to pull in the Bias Amp 2 plugin. So in Studio One Pro, you can just drag the plugin to the track that you want, which is very cool. So I'll click Bias Amp 2 and I'll just drag it on over, and it opens up for us, voila, like magic. Now we're ready to move on to step number 2. For step 2, we're going to create our tone in Bias Amp 2. Now we've got the plugin open here. I'm going to scroll down to the metal amps, of course. Now the Insane package has some pretty cool amps in there as well. But we've got the metal amps here, and I tend to gravitate towards the Mesa sounding amp sims, which in this case is a triple tread plate amp. So here the amps open up. Now, as you can see, we have got a multitude of changes that we can make. We can dive really deep into the editing, and I'm not going to get into this in this video. So we're just going to make a few changes here on the EQ, kind of set it to my liking. The one thing I am going to change here is I'm going to go to the cabinets. And I bought the Bias Amp 2 Elite package, so I've got access to their Celestion speakers, which I did a video, I did like a Bias Amp 2 Celestion shootout video almost a month ago, so you definitely want to check that out. I'll leave these links in the YouTube description here. But I'm going to choose the Celestion speaker, and I tend to go with the V30s. I think that's just a really good sounding cabinet and speaker for this amp, for the triple tread plate. So there we go. Now the important part of step number 2, and this is extremely important, is to save this. So let's save this amp setting, and let's just think of a cool name to name it here. We'll just name it that. Okay. So now that amp is saved, we've got our tone in Bias Amp 2, and we can move on to step number 3. Now step number 3 is going to be an extremely fast and easy and simple step. All we're going to do is, since we've already saved our tone, we've created our tone in Bias Amp 2, and we saved it. So I'm going to remove this plugin from this track, and now I'm going to do the same thing that we did in step number 1. I'm just going to go over and find the Bias FX plugin, and I'm just going to drag that over to the track. Now there's probably some different ways you can do this. I'm just showing you kind of the easy way here in my opinion. So now we've got our Bias FX plugin, and we shall move on to step number 4, the final step. Alright, and now for step number 4, the last step here, we want to use the amp that we just created in Bias Amp 2 plugin with the Bias FX plugin, which we now have open. And that's going to allow us to use that really cool amp with all the effects that Bias FX has to offer, like the stomp boxes, the choruses, delays, reverbs, all that good stuff. So what we want to do is pull that amp in. You guys can see I can click on the amp here, I can go down to the left. You see Bias FX, I could grab one of those amps, with the Bias FX plugin. There's Bias Amp, I had the first version of that, and now you see Bias Amp 2. So we want to click on the Bias Amp 2, and as you can see, we've got all the Bias Amp 2 amps available. Now, we're searching for the tone that we just created, and we'll get to that, but I want to show you real quick, you can actually pull in any one of these amps in Bias Amp 2 into your Bias FX plugin. You'll be able to change the EQ on the amp, you'll even be able to change the cabinets and mics and all that good stuff. The only limitation you would have here is you're not able to do the deep editing in Bias FX that you would be able to do in Bias Amp 2. So that's why if you've got a specific tone you want to create with those deep editing features, you would have to make those changes in the Bias Amp 2 plugin first, like we did earlier, and then find that amp in your Bias FX and pull it in. So here's the amp that we created, the metal amp, our triple tread plate tone here that we named it, and we're just going to click on that. And voila, here we are. We now have access to playing our Bias Amp 2 amp with the Bias FX plugin. Now, as you can see, I've got a stomp box here. I like to have a little delay and reverb, but you can add any of these effects that you want. So you guys know me by now. I keep my settings pretty simple and I go pretty light on the effects, but let's check this out and let's just see how it sounds. Alright guys, so now you know exactly how to use a Bias Amp 2 amp with the Bias FX plugin. Guys, I really hope these tips help. I tried to simplify this as much as possible, but if you have any questions, please do leave those in the comments. You guys know I always answer your questions, and I know if you're just starting out with software recording and using plugins and that sort of thing, I know it can be so discouraging and frustrating. So that's why I created this video. And again, if you have questions, please leave those in the comments. I will get to those, and I'll get you on the right track. Get it? Recording and track? Bad pun. Anyway, I'll get you on the right track with recording, with plugins and all that good stuff. So guys, don't forget to check out my website, jasonstallworth.com. There you'll find links to iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, all those good places where you can listen and buy my music, which is always appreciated. And until the next video, keep it metal.